So first things first, here's the equipment we're starting with. First thing obviously is our safety equipment. You want to make sure you've got safety goggles when you're working with your equipment. Gloves I don't recommend when you're using the grinder, simply because the glove can get caught in the grinding wheel and pull your hand in. So I use the gloves for my finishing, for the filing and sanding, so you don't stab yourself with your pick. Here's some sandpaper here. Over here we've got the initial material we're going to be using for the pick, some examples of what can be used. You can get some cheap cutlery from your local discount store. They're usually a little bit thicker than what you'd find in a standard commercial pick, but it's usually decent stainless steel that you can grind down, and you got a pre-made handle. Some people like to use tempered hacksaw blades. Here's an example of what some people have suggested to use, which is a bristle from a street cleaner. And here's some wiper blade insert material. You can make picks out of these. I've done it with a Dremel tool before, but these actually make better tension wrenches than anything. We'll show that a little bit later. This is what we're going to be using today. We're starting with these 12-inch sections of feeler gauge stock. I'm going to be using this .020. This one here is a, I don't know if you can see this, let me see if I can get a good shot of the thickness there. This is .025. That's pretty much the standard thickness you're going to find in most commercial picks. You can use anywhere from, say, a .031 for a little bit more durability down to a .015 inch stock, which is what you're going to find in your commercial slim picks to help you get through those tight keyways and around some of the warding. I use a pair of heavy-duty snips to cut these sections into two pieces, so I'll make two picks out of each of these. I like my handles a little bit longer. You could probably squeeze 3 out of these if you needed to, but I like the little bit of extra length there. I've got one that I've already cut here. This is a .020. I've already used half of it, so we're just going to use this one to start with. So I've got a Sharpie. So if we're going to use a template to lay out our pick shape, we'd use a Sharpie to outline the template, either a previous pick that we've used or a template that you can find online, and we just trace it out on here. And so that sticks pretty well as you grind, and you'll see when we quench, some of that Sharpie will probably come off, but it's just really to give you a starting point, an idea to get the basic shape. Here we've got our kind of needle pick set. This is, or I'm sorry, needle file set. This is just for finishing your pick. We'll show the finishing later. And here I've got some shrink tube. So this is heat shrink tube. You can buy it in these pre-cut sections, which is kind of silly expensive. So I get a package of a roll like this on eBay, and you would use this with a heat gun. You cut it to size. I use these for my handles once I finish my pick. Some people prefer not to have any handles on their picks. I have both. I've used them just the straight feeler gauge metal. Gives you good feedback, but this actually adheres pretty closely when you shrink it to the pick. So they make pretty comfy handles, and we'll show that as well. Much cheaper when you buy in a roll like this than when you buy the pre-cut kind. And to do that, again, you need a heat gun or just like a torch. As I mentioned earlier, you can start out by tracing a pick that you like or another pick onto your blank to give you a guideline or a template as to how to start your grinding before you start your finishing steps. Most of these I've done just by hand, and the one I'm going to grind today, I'm going to grind by hand as well because I've done it enough times. Just to give you an idea of some of the types of picks that you can make. Here are some different types of hooks. You'll see some longer and shorter hooks, different types of curvature on the hooks. There's some reach style hooks there. Some with handles, some without. There's our blank that we're going to be using. As we move to the right, you'll see there's a couple Bogota style rakes. And then we've got some shorter hooks over here, and I wanted to show you the shorter ones just to give you an idea of if you wanted to try to squeeze 3 out of one of these 12-inch pieces. you're probably going to need to make them that small or smaller, and I'm going to go pick one up just to give you an idea of how big they are. Also, I'm going to show you a .015 slim hook that I made right here to help me get into some of the tighter keyways, and you can see, I don't know if you can see the flex in this. Let me see if I can show you how much flex there is in that .015. Again, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of durability, but you know, it's a specialized pick for a specialized purpose. And here's half of a blank, and here's the size of a small. So you could probably see where you could get 2, 3, maybe even more. This size or a little bit smaller if you don't mind the shorter handles in your hand. So I've got my bench grinder set up here, just a small bench grinder, nothing heavy duty for this kind of stock. Got my glass of water handy so that I can quench this to keep the metal from getting too hot. Now when I first started, I would take material off of both edges. I'd take some off of this edge, take some off of this edge, and so I'd end up with a neck for my pick, something like this, and have the hook come off the center of the stock. What I found was that the grinding heats the metal enough that it may affect the temper of the steel if you're not careful and quench often. Especially as you continue to grind and your product gets thinner and thinner. Also, what I found through trial and error is that my picks seemed to be more durable when I stopped taking material off of both sides and kept the factory edge as the bottom side of my pick. And also, you'll notice there's a little curve that kind of keeps the sharp edges off from the factory. That curve actually makes a natural little lead-in for the edge of a hook. So I like now to just grind most of the material from one side and create my hook so that the bottom edge of the pick is factory edge intact, and it maintains a little bit better temper that way over time. So let's go ahead and fire it up. Let's zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to use the fine grinder. I think that for this kind of stock, .020, it should take it off quickly enough. Make sure that your table here is close enough to the wheel. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the burrs off this edge. And again, you'll notice I'm not wearing gloves. You get a couple sparks, it might catch you, but it's safer not to wear gloves while you're grinding. You can wear long sleeves if you'd like. Protect your arms a little bit. I tend to like the smell of burnt flesh. Alright, so now I've got that end kind of smoothed out, so I'm not going to cut my hand on that end. And I'm going to start to take away the material on this end. So I'm just going to start some heavy grinding here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a darkened edge up there. It kind of gets a little bit blue. Now what I've done is I've affected the temper of that edge. I'm going to start quenching more often as I get closer to my final pick. Because I want to make sure that the metal that's left from my pick has full temper left. This is good spring steel. Snaps back to shape very nicely. So you want to maintain the durability of your pick by keeping the temper in the steel. You see I'm starting to build my neck. Probably about 2 inches in to the pick. You want to have a good, 1 3/4 to 2 inches of working pick, depending on the types of blocks that you're going to be picking. You want to keep that neck tapered so that it maintains the strength, because you're going to be levering this way. Just a little bit of smoothing the curve for comfort. Your fingers are going to be up there as you're working the pick. You can see already we're getting a pseudo hook shape there. We're just going to continue that trend down and try to keep that end hook from being too close to the grinding wheel here. Also, being careful not to lose that temper, keeping it cool. So if I wanted a super tall hook to get in behind some troublesome pins, if I had enough room in the keyway, I could just start finishing it from there. Thin it out a little bit to maintain that height. I'm just going to make a standard pick today, so I'm not going to have it that tall. I'm going to take some of that off. If you have a brand new wheel, sometimes these edges can be a little bit square. It's actually better after I've done several of these with this wheel, because I get a nice little curved corner here that allows me to just pull it into that corner. Take it a little bit slower now. Don't want to heat it up too much. I'm not going to take as much material with each pass. Generally want to get the neck down to at least about a 1/16 of an inch. It's at this point when it's very important to have your grinder set up so that the table is as close to the wheel without touching as possible, because you don't have much material to work with here, and the last thing you want is for the metal to actually get bound between the wheel and the table, because it will pull the pick straight down in there out of your hands, not only probably destroying your blank, but maybe destroying your grinder as well, at least the wheel. We'll start taking a little bit off the back side of this now. So again, I'm preserving as much of that bottom edge as possible, just kind of finishing off the end of the hook, taking that squareness out of it. Quenching often. I've done this a lot, so I think I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty confident taking it down pretty far with the grinding wheel. If ever you're not confident with the grinding skills, you can stop at this point and just use your file. You can use a heavier file to take some of the material off to get it down to the right thickness. And I think I'm probably going to stop pretty soon, because I think we're close to filing at this point. Let me see if we can get a good shot of where we're at now with this. Maybe not. There we go. So still pretty rough, but there's your basic hook shape. And let's move on to a little bit of finishing. Okay, so we've got our blank ground down to the basic hook shape. It's very close right now. All we have to do is finish it. Let me get it in close so you can see how rough the edges are. You're going to see those burrs on the edge from grinding. You see the edge of the hook isn't smooth. The finishing part is important. Not only does it make your pick look nice, but the smoother and the fewer edges that the pick has, the easier it's going to go in and out of the keyway and slide under the pins and give you better feedback. So finishing is an important part here. We could probably pick a lock with this right now, but I wouldn't want to. Let's finish it up and make it nice. So I've got some files laid out here. As I said, we can use a heavier file to just get rid of our burrs. Just kind of knock the burrs off the back edge here. Same thing in the front. Just very lightly knocking the burrs off. If I needed to take some of that hook down, I can do it like this. Kind of with the finger on the edge of that. Get out of my light so you can see me here. Kind of like that. Just rounding the edge off. Supporting with your finger. This is where I wear the gloves, because they can be sharp at this point, as well as for the sanding portion. I just want to smooth out that curve. A little bit better. Some of the burrs gone now. If I needed to take the hook down, I could always just drag it straight across the file like this. Take some of the height off the hook, get a different angle on the tip. I'm going to leave it about there. Don't want to take too much off. It's one thing, you can't put material back on, so you just have to be a little bit careful as you get to this finishing stage. Fortunately, these 12-inch sections only run a little bit more than $1 a piece. So if you do mess one up, worst case is I've got 6-inch section, I take it down and I make a shorty out of this same piece, just regrind it. So once you've gotten most of the burrs off and you've got your shape pretty close to how you want it, you can then take one of your finishing files. So here's one with a rounded edge, and I can clean out that curved portion with the rounded edge of the file. Again, just against my finger here, wearing the gloves. Smooth it out. We're going to further finish this with some sandpaper to smooth everything out, get rid of all the edges on it. But we just want to be happy with our core shape before we move on to that stage. So here's the sandpaper that I use. I used 800 grit, wet dry. Some people like to even go finer grit for their final finishing, make it mirror finish. Mirror finish is nice, and don't get me wrong, there's some amazing artists out there that make artistic picks that are very functional, but they're also very beautiful. But I'll just tear half a piece off of this. I'll begin by just folding it over the pick. back and forth and turning it occasionally, get those edges. And again, gloves help because if you're using different kind of picks, say we were going to do a Bogota or a thinner pick or something, as you're going back and forth through this, very often I've poked right through the sandpaper into my finger. So it's nice to use gloves when you're doing this part of it. Another technique I've seen used is that guys will take like a phone book and they'll fold the sandpaper between the pages of a phone book and then just move the pick in and out of the pages. It's an effective technique as well. Oh, see what just happened? If I wasn't wearing the gloves, that'd probably be in my finger right now. You want to make sure you get this area nice and smooth as well. So when you're holding the pick, and that's where your fingers are going to control it, both on this bottom edge. So you want to make sure these edges have no sharp edges on them, as well as this top edge up here. Usually your finger's going to rest up there, and then you'll fulcrum against this finger. Sanding does take material off the pick, albeit not as quickly as a file. You will thin your picks out if you continually sand them. I use the regular steel stock when I buy my feeler gauge stock, and it doesn't really seem to rust. I've tried the stainless steel. Stainless steel doesn't seem to be any better in terms of picks, and in fact, the ones that I've tried making out of stainless don't seem to last as long. They don't seem to be as durable as the standard steel. And I've not had a problem, you know, if I keep my picks in just a case with them rusting or anything like that. So the standard steel, it's the least expensive and I think probably the best material to use. So here we go after about 10 minutes of polishing with the sandpaper. Just very smooth now, very usable at this point. Now one thing I like to do with a lot of my hooks is to put what I call a little feeler notch in the end of the hook, so that as I'm moving under the pins, if it's got a rounded bottom, sometimes it helps me to feel when I'm on the pin rather than between pins. So here's how I do that. So the first thing I'll have to do is probably flatten that hook out a little bit to get a little bit more surface, and then I'm just going to take a file, finishing file, and put a notch into it. So let me flatten it out a little bit just by dragging it along the large file. Alright, that takes it off fairly quickly, so it doesn't take too many passes. And again, remember you can take material off, but you can't put it back on, so we can always go back and finish this. So what I'll do is I'll just chuck this up here in a vise, get most of the pick down in the vise to protect that the end of that hook, and just leave the end of the hook protruding like that. See if I can get a little closer shot on that. And then what I'll do is I'll take one of my sharp-edged finishing files, like this triangular one or square one. I try to find the one with the sharpest edge. The square one kind of has a sharper edge to it, so I'm going to use that. And I'm just going to try to get right in the middle of the end of that hook, and just start to score it. This is a little bit tougher than the other filing. It's very, it doesn't want to cut into the metal at first until you get a little groove started. But once you get it started, it only takes a few more cuts to get enough of an indentation there. It helps you with a little bit of extra feedback when you're feeling for the pins. Take a look at that. Yeah, so I've got just a tiny bit of an indentation there now. So I may go a little bit further with that, but I'm going to stop right there for now. That probably gives me enough, and I'll smooth that off with the sandpaper as well too, just take any of those edges that I may have created the file off. So the last thing I'm going to show here is putting a grip on this pick. So here's the pick as it stands now. You could use it just like this if you like that feel of metal. If you want a little softer grip, I take my shrink tube, just sort of measure it to the beginning of that curve, and then cut it off. You can use a regular pair of scissors. I don't have scissors handy, so I'm just going to use my snips. Should work fine. If they were long enough. Okay. Throw that down. So that's going to be my grip. So it fits right to the end, right about where that finger grip's going to go. What I'm going to do now, grab my torch, fire it up. Got gloves on. You could also use vice grips to hold it down. I'm going to try to do this quickly so I don't need them. And you just kind of pass it through the end of the flame. I'm going to get the back edge set first. You can see that just shrinks down nicely. This will heat the pickup, so I'm using gloves. Again, you could use vice grips instead. You don't want to burn it, just shrink it. And that's about as far down as it'll go. It'll go tight to the pick. Okay? I'm just going to set this down for a minute. Make sure it's not too hot. It is too hot to pick up, so I'm going to shut this down for a second. Okay, so I went ahead and grabbed a pair of vice grips, probably the smarter way to do this. You clamp it just right over there, and I'm going to finish shrinking this down, finish our handle. You can dunk it in water to cool it, or just set it aside and let it cool off. And when it's done, we'll have a nice handled pick. I mentioned earlier that you can make picks out of windshield wiper inserts. It's true, it's very good spring steel, it's a good source of it. When you go to change your windshield wipers out, just pull that metal strip that's reinforcing the rubber out of it. It'll just pull straight out, just find an end, grab a pair of needle nose pliers and yank it out. You can, but I think the best use of these is for tensioning tools. And you'll see that we have like 3 different thicknesses here from different size windshield wiper blades. I'm going to choose, the smaller one would be good for like small padlocks. Medium, probably, just general pin tumbler locks. And the larger you could use for various purposes like dimple locks. Usually you'll require a little bit wider tensioning tool. So I'm going to go with the medium one. So we can just snip a section You don't need a very long section, just enough to be able to bend it into an L shape. So I'll snip about 4 inches or so off there. Oh, it's tough stuff. It's durable, that's for sure. And so we've got our section there. Now I could just take a pair of needle nose pliers and sort of grip it, about 3/4 of an inch down, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch down, depending on how long you want your L to be, and bend it over. Peterson makes this nifty little tool called a U-Bend-It, and so it basically allows you to stick it into this channel, measure off how much you want, and just simply bend it around that corner. It maintains that radius so that you don't stress the metal to the point where it breaks. And so now we've got a makeshift tension tool. It's really all you need. Some people like to take a couple sets of needle nose and a set of vice grips and bend it 90 degrees to give them a nice flat surface. We're just going to keep it like this for now. So now we have our finished pick. See that little notch that we cut into it? Get a good look at it there. And you can see that I took a number punch and I punched 020 so that I know the thickness of this pick when I pull it out of my case. The other thing I did was take our tension wrench and bent a little L in the other end of it, so it's a two-sided tension wrench, and I'm going to use that smaller L to do top tensioning in this Sargent lock to test out our pick. Here's the bitting on the lock. Sargents are pretty tight locks, tight tolerances. Works fine with the key. We're going to give it a shot with some top tension here and test out our new pick. There we go. So our new pick works, our tension tool works, and there you go. I saved a few bucks and had an excuse to buy some power tools.